All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode 384 for the week of April 27th, 2025. I'm your host, DBQ Hams. It's been a few weeks since I've been here, but I am glad to be back. And I think I even have most of my voice after spending the last few days yelling and screaming at the NFL draft up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and cheering along with 100 to 200,000 NFL fans, or booing along with him, depending on the pick and when the commissioner would come out. But yes, it was, I think my voice has recovered. I know my ears have stopped ringing, so that has been good, and I'm glad to be back after a few weeks here. And joining me tonight is Game Logic, running the boards as always. Game, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. So it's pretty impressive to hear that you were out at the draft. So was that like a bucket list item, just, that you decided to go ahead and execute on since it was right up in your neck of the woods?
It was definitely within driving distance, and I had some family to stay with, so I wasn't paying exorbitant amounts for a hotel or an Airbnb. Yeah, it was definitely kind of like, I know I could never afford or would never dedicate the money to do a Super Bowl type of experience. So having the draft experience and kind of making your way around to all the different tents that they had during the out on the grounds, but really the draft itself was the exciting piece of being up in the crowd and amongst, like, we've all been to concerts at some point in time where there's 100,000 people, but you're sitting in stands or in a stadium and not necessarily just all in a standing room area. So yeah, it was first round of the draft was a lot of fun, a lot of standing, a lot of cheering, and some, the weather was good. Second round was on Friday, and the weather wasn't so great, but what that meant was the turnout early on wasn't super high. So we got there a little early and ended up getting into the backfill area. So up on the stage in the paid section. So like paying to get a box like you see on TV of fans who are all decked out is, a seat or a box can cost you, like day one was like $1,500 to $200, $1,500, $2,000. Day two was like $1,000. Day three on Saturday was like $600 to $800, depending on where you sat. So getting in the backfill area meant that we were relatively close to all that area, but didn't pay anything. That they just needed crowd to backfill so that when they pan the camera around for crowd shots, that you were there. So we ended up getting really close up under the stage area, and that made it a bucket list experience by being kind of not just out in the middle of the crowd, but also kind of having a VIP experience to it as well. So, between cheering at the draft and cheering on Wednesday night when securing a Switch 2 pre-order, it was a lot of screaming in my neck of the woods here for the last couple of days. But yes, so Switch 2 pre-orders. So my two sons and actually my wife, all four of us got into the pre-order process on Wednesday evening. So for North America, they launched midnight Central Time. And, so we had apps up for Walmart, Best Buy, and Target. And one son got in the line at Walmart and got through. I got in the line at Walmart and kind of got hung up and kind of eventually kicked out. Target was, as other people have said online, really kind of crashed. Like you could add it to your cart, but then the API was really crashing or failing in different spaces because it wouldn't, like, even if you were logged in before on the app, it wouldn't populate with your credit card number, or if it populated with your credit card number, it wouldn't populate with your shipping address or your billing address. And so there were all kinds of like I've been listening and reading about people who have, got through, but then have also got cancellation emails. And so we ended up getting 2, and which is great because then each of my sons had one. We were feeling pretty good. My wife was about to kind of close everything off on her phone and on her computer, and she looked at her Walmart cart and in the app, and she had one in her cart, and it was asking her, she had 9 minutes left to check out. So we ended up with 3 pre-orders, and at this point none of them had been canceled. So we'll see what happens. It's certainly possible that some of these might get canceled, but it was a successful night. And actually, it's kind of fun in terms of like we had a back channel going in terms of just where each of us were within the queue process or waiting in line, or so we were none of us were in the, like, besides my wife and I, none of us, my 2 kids were not in the same spot. They were all at their own apartment or in their college dorm, but collectively we're kind of experiencing the pre-order midnight rush aspect of the Switch pre-orders, which really geared me up to go stand in line with hundreds of thousands of people for the draft the next day, when you were standing in a virtual line with millions of people trying to get a Switch 2. So yeah, it's been a pretty exciting past couple days, but it's also been a pretty exciting week of releases, and you've got some good stuff to talk about here, Game Logic, and so I'm glad to be back and be able to talk about this. So let's head into our first game. So as we do every week, we've got our kind of big games that we've been playing. Then we'll hit some news stories for the last week, things that we found notable or that we want to highlight, and then kind of round out by what else we've been playing. So Game Logic, while I was up cheering on the draft, you were downloading and playing some Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is it's a French team, correct? Kind of somewhat of a traditional RPG, but also with some modernizing touches here is kind of how it's been built. So how's your experience been? What made you decide to pick it up? And what do you like it or not like it about it?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd put it in the box of a traditional JRPG. I think there's enough differences here, and I mean, and maybe to a certain extent, that's partially because I don't know if I would put Atlas style games into like the traditional box of a JRPG, because they're a skosh along their own path too. So my experience has been great. I mean, it's tough to talk about this game and not ascribe a lot of the hyperbole that I often see, like, from other people who gush about video games, and I feel sometimes like take it into flights of hyperbole. But there's an argument here that kind of what we're seeing for the people who are playing is maybe one of the most significant releases of 2025, right? Other than GTA 6. That's
a pretty big statement. So, I mean, I could see an angle for that in terms of a smaller studio kind of hitting the big time. But what grounds that statement for you?
For me, it's a matter of just the creative achievement. Just in terms of, I mean, the way this release kind of pulls so many things together and then has its own kind of stylistic flair to present itself as something different, even though verily it heavily treads on things that have been done before. And the way in which it is executed upon just doesn't leave a lot of room. I mean, there's room for critique, but it's kind of like there's room for critique like you critique a Souls game, right? There's room for critique in terms of like how I critique The Last of Us Part 2, right? Like it's for all that I could take those games and say, well, they're niche and they don't appeal to so many people, like there's no argument that they're great video games, right? And that's what I feel like we're kind of witnessing, like I said, with Clair Obscur Expedition 33. for my own taking to it just hits a lot of drum beats for things that are heavily in my wheelhouse. The backdrop and kind of narrative tapestry that the game is wrapped in is very much like a period film, which is a huge thing for me. It is very Victorian-esque, which is another big huge thing for me. It teeters on the edge of kind of steampunk, which is another big huge thing for me. One thing I will definitely say is last year I took that moment in time, right, to make the excursion and go out and just say I was going to suck it up and deal with a lot of the things I didn't like about JRPGs and kind of force myself to push through them, and play them and find out, if there were things about them that I could enjoy. Turned out to be good training for me because if you walk into this game and you haven't been exposed to the do loop of resource management and, with if you ever study aircraft and dogfighting, there's a lot of conversation about the conservation of altitude and speed, that every maneuver you make is basically has an expense or a cost associated with it. And the person who loses the accounting battle of altitude and speed, right, is the person who loses. And so there's a little bit of that to this, just in terms of like you have to collectively manage and aggregate the notion of aggregation of action points, power charges, defensive maneuvers, healing, and just kind of manage that kind of in a do loop, right? And be prepared to deal with contingencies when things go wrong. There's a heavy, and in that loop, there's a very heavy note of gamble, right? Like there are moments in time where you have to take risks. And some of these are going to be risks that you take on redos, right? Because you lose a battle. And there are absolutely some battles. There are these things that I think they're called troubadours, which are, as far as I can tell, are optional bosses. So optional kind of mini bosses. Like they are sometimes not as heavy in hit points as a real boss, as a campaign boss, but the thing that they do is their attacks are one hits, right? And they're not really one hits, right? Technically, like the problem is that their sequence of attacks is often 2 hits or 3 hits. But the point is that should they land those, then they will take one of your 3 characters down. And so in that there are a lot of games. Let's not talk about RPGs, but just games in general. There are a lot of games that have a parry system in them, but will kind of allow you for the vast majority of the game to get away with not learning how to parry, right? Not being bothered with parry. This is not that game. It is absolutely incumbent upon you to learn how to parry. And there are some of those fights with the troubadours that in order to, because their hits are 1-hit kills, you have to learn to just swallow your gut, right? And take the risk and gamble to parry so that you can score like the 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 points of damage in a counter. And so in this in between time of the turn, when it's the enemy's turn, you always have 3 options when they attack. You can parry, you can dodge, or you can jump. In jumping, you sometimes use because you have some enemies who ground pound, or do like a low sweeping attack, and so you're going to want to jump, right, to get over those.
So are those menu selections that then you have to time with a button press, or are they always an option and you have to read the battle in order to respond correctly?
They are a real-time option, and so they are. So if you're using a controller, they are RB, B, and A. And whenever an enemy initiates their attack, they are active. And as long as they're kind of like in attack mode, you can hit them at any time. And so you can absolutely misread an enemy and activate one of those and go into like your parry animation, your jump animation, or your dodge animation while they're still like in their windup, right? Because you mistimed it. So it is so in that moment in time, it is totally real time. You can like pull the thing off too early because they do a lot of like dance moves and kind of things and a lot of telegraphing, and it makes you think that they're like the attack is about to go off. And it's absolutely possible for you to hit a button and dodge too early, and over anticipate their attack, but then actually hit it again at the moment when they do attack and actually pull off a dodge. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that makes the game great in aggregate, and I think the thing that is really getting it good reviews and getting a lot of people who are enjoying it is that right that kind of Vegas casino kind of feeling of like pulling off the parry. It was very rewarding to me to hear, because I don't play Souls games because Souls games are too difficult for me. It was very rewarding for me to see on Twitter today, and I think on Blue Sky, some people who are Souls people saying that they're having difficulty landing some of the parries. But I think it's the combat system. One of the improvements that I feel like this game makes over an Atlas game is very many times in Metaphor ReFantasio and Shin Megami Tensei, as you get granted powers, I feel like there's powers that you get granted that pretty much become powers that you just ignore, right? It's kind of like the turn-based version of Madden, if you will. Like there are some powers you get that, like, out of a set of 6, you feel like maybe 3 really matter, right? There's your big attack that you really want to use. There's your attack that you use when you don't have enough in the bank to use the big power. And then there's like a defense or a healing move, right, that you sometimes get obligated, right, and have to use. The difference in this game to me is I feel like every single one of the powers that are granted, and you will be granted more powers than you can arm at any one time, like across all of your characters. So there winds up being a lot to manage, right? Powers, it's
each character arms their own, like you've got individual character management for powers and setting up their kind of skill-based trees.
Yeah, it gets really deep. So each character has a set of powers. I'll just call them magic, right? They're not necessarily magic. They're a combination of like magic, combat maneuvers, all depending on the character, right? And so those powers come from a skill tree. And as you engage in battles, you get granted skill points that you can spend. Each power, they call them skill, right? So each skill requires a certain number of action points, and you earn action points over the course of battle for pulling off things like a dodge or a parry, executing a simple attack that doesn't cost any action points. And so you build up these action points over time, and then you can spend them in the use of skills. And so those skills come from a skill tree. Each character can arm up to 6. You will quickly obtain more than 6 powers for all 4 characters, right, that you might have in your party. And so that's one aspect you have to manage. Then there are these things called pictos. And pictos are, I don't really know what they are. They're like another form of skill, like, or magic, but they're like their own separate category. And so you can arm 3 of those.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
like, as you're talking about skills or magic, like traditionally, you've got either a mana meter or a SP points, right? You've got some type of gauge to tell you how much you can do that. So, is that different than the pictos? Which, so how do they meter your use?
Those are the action points. So the APs.
Okay.
So the AP. So you will go into combat. You will typically start with a baseline of like 3 APs. Sometimes a skill, but also sometimes a picto will amplify like the amount of APs that you start like a turn with. So pictos are another thing. Pictos are not. They're not class specific or character specific. So out of all the pictos that you earn, and you will earn a lot. Like, so I have 4 characters now. Every character can arm 3 pictos. So that would be like 12. but I have like 24, 25 to like 30 pictos. So, and then sometimes you will get like repeat pictos that are like a level up from like an old picto. So each character can arm 3 pictos at a time. And yeah, and then and then here's the other thing. Then you have these things called, I'm not absolutely certain of the name. I think they're called Luminas. I'm not even sure if I can explain this. If you win 4 battles, anytime you win 4 or more battles with pictos that are armed, they become Luminas. Luminas are passive pictos, and they are armed. They can be armed all the time, regardless of what pictos you have armed. So the way it works is, let's say you have 4 characters. They arm 4 pictos. They win 4 battles. You now have 16 pictos that can be slotted into your Lumina slots. Each character earns a certain number of Lumina spots over time. There are things that can be done. There are things that you pick up around the map that when you go to camp, you can turn them in to add to the total number of Luminas that a character can arm. Every picto that you have armed automatically counts into a Lumina slot. So let's say you have 18 Lumina slots. Pictos have a certain power score associated with them. And so let's say you have 3 pictos armed and they're 1 point apiece. So now you have 15 Luminas left over. You can arm it. So like I was saying, so every picto you have armed of 3 count against your Luminas. But then once those 3 are accounted for, you can arm any other pictos that have been classified as Luminas to any character. So basically what it means is that over time, all of the characters benefit from all of the pictos that all of the characters use, even if they don't have those pictos armed at any one time. So it's like it's a stack and a stack and a stack and a stack. Then the 4th thing that you have is weapons. As you go around the game and you fight monsters, or sometimes you just encounter them in a pickup, you will be granted weapons. As far as I can tell, what happens is weapons that you obtain seem to only be usable by one character, and so over time, like you're gonna wind up obtaining like 4, 5, 6 weapons per character, and then you can arm those.
And how many characters are you dealing with in a party?
Right now I have 4, okay. But what happens is theoretically, in your cutscenes, all 4 of those characters are traveling around, but only 3 can be armed into your battle party at any one time. Which is interesting because as far as I can tell, the game doesn't tell you that. So I obtained my 4th character, and for several battles, I never had her in the party. And I was like, well, how do you get her in the party? And it has an icon in the character management screen that says remove from party, add to party. But the game never really, like, as far as I can tell, maybe it did it very early and I just didn't remember it because it was trying to teach something to you when you didn't have a 4th member of the party, so you wouldn't have to manage it, maybe. But at any rate, eventually I remembered, oh yeah, it has this thing. And so weapons, you can upgrade weapons at your camp once you meet a certain character. And then, but what's funny is, so you'll upgrade weapons, and then you will fight monsters.
Upgrades are only possible at the camp?
Yes. Yeah.
So almost like a crafting piece where you've got to be in a certain spot. Okay.
Right. Be in a certain spot and meet a certain character, because until you meet that character and that character starts showing up at your camp, you can't upgrade weapons. But the funny thing is you'll upgrade weapon. Like several times I've upgraded a weapon at the camp using like tchotchkes and like your currency or whatever that you pick up. I will leave the camp. I will immediately encounter like a monster. I will obtain a weapon in that encounter that will trump what I just upgraded. Right. So that happens.
So does that mean the drop rates out in the world are feeling pretty rewarding then? Or just that you've had good luck?
They seem to be pretty rewarding. I mean, one thing I will definitely say, the game is not stingy. It is not it is not one of these games that tries to bleed you dry, like, and make you feel like you're never earning, like you're constantly earning stuff. And that's part of the cognitive overhead, right? You are constantly from battle to battle to battle, at least for me right now. And I've got about 15 hours into the game so far. You are constantly managing pictos, as you go through battles, your pictos, right, will upclass to luminas. And so then you got to manage luminas. You're constantly earning, one or two additional lumina spots, right, in characters as they win battles. So, if you don't watch it, you'll go in to the character management screen and suddenly you'll be like 5 or 6 lumina points over what you were before, as you'd be like, oh crap, like I've been like fighting for an hour and I didn't even realize I had like 6 more slots, right, of stuff to arm. So there is that. You do have to get into like a management loop of like, okay, end battle, go to the character management screen, figure out if I'm going to swap anybody in and out for my battle party, check everybody's health, determine if I'm going to use my elixir to heal the entire party, which, I assume what most people will do. Like for me, I have like a metric threshold in my head of like, okay, this is at the point where, because you get a certain number of elixirs, like I think they're called elixirs. You have elixirs and then you maybe have this other thing that's like a heal all party thing. I'm just going to call it an elixir for now. It may be called something different, but you get a certain number of those per day. You start the game with 1, then you'll get 2, and then at this point, like I have 3. And so
how's the onboarding for all that? Like all the systems you're describing that are stacking on top of each other, whether it's in combat with magic or with pictos, and then kind of the skill points. And are you feeling like the onboarding of that was allowed you to explain it here, or that you had to kind of dive in yourself to figure out what was going on?
I'm gonna guess, right, because I'm actually not sure. My belief is in this game, I am like the classic Monster Hunter player that constantly frustrates us, right? That's like, oh, well, all you got to do this and that. And like they're talking all this bit bop boom, like Monster Hunter techno babble. And you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Just keep playing after 20 hours.
Right. So I will say, I feel like I'm looking at this through rose-colored lenses, because there are things here that feel familiar from, again, Atlas style games. And I really wonder if I'd not played Atlas style games last year, if I hadn't bothered with, initially Persona 3 on Game Pass, and then like I might be totally lost. I think the game does try and teach you these things in the beginning. But one of the problems is it's like, again, they're speaking to you like it's a huge world building game. Everything is non-common. Their entire way of life is just different. There's a very kind of Games of Thrones-ish, but maybe even more, I think more like Dune, right? Like Dune, like if you do not know the language of Dune, you will be completely, if you don't know what a Bene Gesserit is and understand the Kwisatz Haderach, and like those things become super confusing.
Dropping those terms, right? But you're right. Like it is its own vocabulary, or assumes that you're coming in with this knowledge, or that you have exterior sources to understand the Bene Gesserit, right? Like and what that is and why that's important. Does it provide you any type of codex or in-game kind of supplements to that?
There is a thing in the menu that's called like I can't remember what it's called, but it's like the world of Expedition 33 or Expeditions at a Glance or something like that. So there is a thing in there. Again, as you and I have talked over the many years, right? My personal feeling is like, look, if you're making me dig through a thing and read it, then there's something you've done wrong in your onboarding, right? So when the game does briefly try and give you tutorials and pop things on your screen and make you understand them, I like kind of just glanced at them hurriedly and got the gist and just moved on, right? And I don't feel that wound up with me being broken in the game. It just led to those moments in time that, like I said, like I because I didn't pay attention to something, I eventually looked like in a management screen and realized, oh, I've been granted like this for when you get your 4th character. It's really weird. You get her. I probably got CL like maybe I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 hours into the game, something like that. And so the first time I looked at her character sheet in the management screen, all of her attributes, which are like your, I think it's like your vigor, your might, your agility, luck, and like and something else, right? Defense. And the first time I looked at it, they were all zeros, and I'm like, oh well, like okay, I guess they're considering her completely unskilled since she just joined the party. But like that's really weird. Like she's an expeditioner. Like she should have like some baseline thing of skills. At some point, I looked back at that character sheet and I had like 48 skill points to spend. So what I can't tell is, oh, was that there the entire time from the first time I picked her up? Or did I get granted 48 points like the first time I took her into battle, and then like immediately I got like 48 like catch-up points? So like I just don't know. So I don't feel like I don't personally feel like the onboarding is harsh, other than it may lead you to like miss a couple things, right? That will cause you to wonder, like, have I missed this for like the last hour or so?
Yeah, maybe not the most clear, but also streamlined in terms of bringing people up to speed.
Yeah. But like I said, there's a part of the problem for some people will be, and like, look, I mean, I'm a type of gamer where unless you're a flight sim, right? And I know that I'm onboarding to read a flight manual, right? I'm just not going to tend to read text, right? In a game trying to explain, like, I feel like a game should be intuitive enough, or like there's a problem. So, but like I said, like this game has a ton of world building, just stuff you don't understand and you're not going to know. And if you choose to ignore that, like you're gonna learn fairly quickly, right? In a very harsh manner, right? Like the game's gonna punish you, and you'll figure it out. But my assumption is it's not that bad because, like I said, the game's hugely popular, getting tons of positive reviews, good Steam community user community reviews and things. So, what I will say, that my comparison is remember when we played Starfield, and one of my complaints about Starfield was, hey, the game lets you not mainline the campaign, but a lot of the tutorials are delivered via you mainlining the campaign. So if you choose not to mainline the campaign, you're going to have things that aren't presented to you, like how to manage ship upgrades. Like I never got like the starport like tutorial until very late in the game when I like went up to a kiosk, right, and got it. So I don't personally feel like the game gapped me that much. But like I said, there are just some things that I do notice that like, it never really showed me that. Two other things I'll say on it is, one, it has if you play Tiny Tina's Wonderland, it has kind of the large world size map for you to run around on to go from like,
I remember them talking about an overworld, so it kind of treats it like that. So is it, but it's not node to node. It is kind of open, but you can only interact with certain spaces on it then.
Ish. You can come up on monsters, right, and engage and get pulled into like combat from there. And there are like elixirs and other things like and expedition logs, right, that you'll find on the map as you go around like the overworld map, just as you do when you're down at like the tactical map and actually like operating in kind of the open worldish kind of space. And then the last positive that I'll kind of talk about is when I talk about like why is this game popular, why are people loving it, is the dialogue, the voice acting, and the narrative, right, the plot, everything from a literary perspective is super rich. It's super painful. There's some very, very, very heavyweight topics with how the society deals with death that this game does not shirk from. It puts it in your face. You have different characters who deal with it differently, as you would expect people to. I would say the closest analog in like most common like literature and cinema and things is if you've ever watched movies that are set like in Europe, between concerning and or in between World War One, the span in between them, and World War II, where Europe literally lost like a whole generation of men. that is kind of like that is kind of what motif this game kind of exudes.
So the general like backstory here is that everybody dies at a certain age, or that the age is ticking down. Is that how that?
Yeah, I would say there's a baseline dialogue and not get into things that you'll hear and discover in the game, which cause you to question that. But yes, the basic premise and setup from all of like the preliminary marketing materials was that every year the paintress, right, which is the big bad, right, this some godlike seemingly being, the paintress wakes up and paints a number on a mountain, and it seems like she you know, she's constantly like counting down, and so the primary setup for it is that this year she painted the number 33, so everybody who was I believe everybody who was 33 winds up dying, and I think it's 33, or maybe they were 34, but like because there's things that they say and there's things that they don't say, so it may be that everybody in expedition 33 is 33 years old and has one more year to live theoretically. But you know, give or take some points of like precision and accuracy right in that. But
in general, that's kind of the setup. Yep.
Yeah,
which makes it a heavy topic to wrestle with, and I find it really interesting that you seem to be appreciating the job that they're doing with the narrative.
Yeah, it like I said, it speaks to kind of a lot of the literary things that I've tended to like. It creates a certain scenario that is, I don't know, I guess familiar, or there's lots of kind of fiction written about it, but also kind of some real life things, right? In the fiction, right, the thing is you can see in the society that there are people who accept it and then there are people who don't, right? And that creates kind of like a bifurcation, right, of how people kind of deal with it. And again, that's like a thing that you see in movies, right? So there are some people in certain situations who like accept that the inevitable is going to happen, and there are some people who, you know, insist on going down fighting, right, even if it is inevitable. But even if there's like a 1% chance, right, that it won't happen, you know, they're going to shoot for that 1% chance. So it's super interesting. Like I said, there's tons of like societal accommodations, right, that like, again, the way they live their lives is just vastly different from normal kind of day-to-day society in our world. Like I said, I'm really, it's really hard to talk about the game without like spoiling any of it.
I mean, I think the fact that you are this invested in it, after the fact that you've spent 15 hours with it, the fact that this world and narrative wrapper has invested in you, and then that you are enjoying the kind of the idiosyncratic, the idiosyncrasies of the combat. I could see why when you started this conversation out, like you were really high. You're high on this game. Like it's doing a lot of things that are checking boxes. It is punching above its weight in terms of not being a major studio and kind of their first big release. Like it seems like it is firing on all cylinders, which is exciting to hear. Kind of an upstart kind of really connect and bodes well for the future.
Yeah, it's very dark fantasy, and then it strews humor throughout it.
How's the voice acting? I know there's been a number of kind of big name voice actors.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's Charlie Cox, from Daredevil, Ben Starr, Jennifer English, and even the characters who like are voiced by people who like aren't popular, aren't household brand, gamer household brand names, do an incredible job. There's tons of character interactions that make you go, wait, what's going on between those two? Like, it's yeah. So um yeah, it's just, I mean, overall, like it's just pretty amazing. There's another thing that I was gonna uh bring up that I can't remember. Oh yeah, then again, probably the last thing that I specifically want to call out. The game also, it is a, what was the game that we've been talking about recently that is like a spectacle? Like that's the whole kind of design motif of the game. I can't remember.
As a
There's
like graphical spectacle.
yeah, it's like it's a label that's been applied to certain games as like a spectacle shooter or a spectacle fighter type of game. I can't remember what it is, but some game that we've talked about in the last few weeks. Um, but this game, the other thing I will say is the attention to detail and the, not even necessarily the attention to detail, the understanding of human psychology and like the dopamine triggering type of in-game events that apparently the animation team focused on is like every power has an animation that like when you pop it you're like, oh man, what, that happened? So, and there's just
You're running this on PC in 1440 or?
yeah, so I've played this across two PCs so far. I've played it on a Ryzen 9 7950X with a RTX 3080 GT. And then just today I played several hours on a box with a Ryzen 7, I think it is technically Ryzen 7 7800X 3D with the 3D V cache, and then an RTX 4080. There's, I think the optimization is above board. There's not quite the performance scaling that I want, but what I see across two different sets of hardware, not older hardware, newer hardware, is consistency. So on the RTX 3080 Ti, I saw frame rate dips a little lower. So that game, so on Epic settings with ultra performance set, when I initially had it set for DLAA, I was barely getting 60 frames per second and frequent dips below. On the 3080 Ti, I moved it and I left it on Epic settings, but moved it to ultra performance. And yes, I'm playing at 1440p. And the game runs between 85 frames per second and probably 115 frames per second. And you can sometimes see like a lot of variance right on that. On the RTX 4080 box, I'm running at 1440p DLSS with in balanced mode. And the game runs between maybe 105, I'd say between 105 and 115. But so the variance is less and it's much more consistent. It periodically will then scale to 120s, 135, but it does that pretty infrequently. But pretty much it floats at a pretty stable consistency between 105 and 115. So higher end hardware doesn't necessarily seem to be letting me push frames that much further, although maybe I might get like a lot more frames if I went to ultra performance mode on the 4080. But mostly what I'm seeing is you just get less variance in the frame rate.
Wow. This, again, like narratively, gameplay wise, technology wise, like it seems to be firing on all cylinders. Really impressive. So, Warwana, thanks for joining us and joining the chat. If you're catching up, we've been gushing about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 for about the last 30 minutes or so. So, but I downloaded it this weekend. I am sorry that I didn't get a chance to play it, but everything that you're talking about, Game Logic, just is singing my song. Like, as somebody who enjoys an RPG, like the systems sound like they feel good. So here's another question based on the way that you and I often play games. Is this a game that do you feel like you're going to lose the understanding of the interconnection of those systems if it goes back into your rotation, or is it something that you're going to be able to pick back up and jump back into?
I don't think so, because the systems are fairly consistent, and they're not Byzantine or like loosely structured. Like I think the problem with like a No Man's Sky, for instance, if you jump out of No Man's Sky and come back, there are a lot of systems that you're dependent upon, but they're very loosely structured. They don't have like a lot of analogs in the real world. Their recipes and cookbooks are very esoteric. They're the kind of thing that you don't remember if you don't do them all the time. But this one, it's as much as I say it, and again, my description of the systems is more about the expedition babble of they're named different things. But when you go to the character screen, to the party management screen, I mean, it's pretty simple. You have weapons, skills, Pictos, and Luminous, right? 4 things. And you have things that are right. You have an interrelationship between the Pictos and the Luminas, and that's almost like a card game, Uno type of relationship, right, between those things and how they work. So I don't feel that's a thing that's gonna like drop out of my head. So yeah, the biggest problem ish that people have pointed to is the world map. It doesn't have anything of like, hey, you've completed this area, you've completed that area. There's tons of areas that are marked on the map that aren't named. And so you're like, okay, there's something there, but I don't know what that is. Areas are really only marked on the map if they are campaign applicable. And so, once you get past primary game, like that ability to kind of delve into side missions and side content and stuff might become problematic. But I mean, in general, like your current objective is like highlighted like a red hexagon with like spider web lines all over, like you can't miss it. So and there's a way for you to be reminded what your objective is. It's also always on the screen. So yeah, I mean, something like a Baldur's Gate 3, like the world is so big that like when I go back to that game, I'm like, what was I doing? Like, where am I supposed to go? Like, what is my objective? So I think it's more manageable than some of those things.
Nice. That's encouraging as well. Warwana, I also fired this game up on cloud when I was on the treadmill last night, but didn't get a chance to really play it too much on the cloud. But so you're here getting some latency, so I'll have to give that a try as well.
Yeah, I would. If somebody else may try it and give some real world data, I would just say my impression from playing it on Metal is do not try and play this game over the cloud. There's literally everything about the combat is timing based. And
you were saying even playing it locally, the timing is tight and hard to.
It is. You are looking at the character animations. It's not like, if you've ever played on a basketball team, right? And they tell you, I can't remember what the coaches would tell us, like, watch the other player's hips or watch the other player's leg or something like that, right? So like watch it.
You're watching their belly button, right? Yeah, where's their belly button? Yep.
Right. It's not like there are some other things where like you can kind of generically look at a thing and like within your, within the lane of your peripheral vision, you kind of know, right, what's going to happen. Like this is a game where you're watching enemies, when they're in their attack mode, and you're literally watching like their weapon or their leg because because the parry timing is based on, okay, as soon as their weapon goes in motion, I need to hit parry, right? And the thing that makes the parry thing difficult is every enemy's timing is different. And when some enemies start hitting you with multiple attacks, right? Multiple 3-hit offensives, 2-hit offensives, very frequently the cadence, the syncopation changes, right? Like, I can't remember this one made like boss that I fought, like she would have, and then you get to a point where some of them have 2-hit, some of them have 3-hit, some of them have 4-hit. And then you get some battles where they don't tell you, like there are some enemies they'll tell you like, so and so starts a 3-hit combo. But then there's one major boss that I fought where they just told you like so and so launches a fire attack or so and so launches an ice attack, but like you don't know whether or not it's a 3-hit attack or a 4. There are some even smaller enemies that like this enemy launches a swing attack, and there are sometimes that swing attack is 2 hits, and sometimes when it's 3, and you don't know that third hit is coming until they launch into that animation. So there are many times that the animation you're not timing it right. You're watching right a weapon to go in motion. There's one enemy that does a big overhead swing, and it's like the timing on that is like a split second before they go into motion. Like, so yeah, I can't imagine how anybody would play this over the cloud. And like I said, when they attack to survive an encounter to play the game, you're going to have to parry, dodge, or jump. Like you can't just go toe to toe with people and not bother right responding to their attacks, because like there's just no way you'll get through an encounter that way.
So last month we were talking about Assassin's Creed Shadows and all of its accessibility options and kind of different level scaling. How does this work in terms of accessibility or difficulty as you're talking about the challenge of the parry windows and things like that? Like if we think about Respawn's Jedi Survivor series, that you can tweak the parry window to be more forgiving or more challenging. Do you get a lot of kind of accessibility difficulty options here?
As far as I know, you just have difficulty options. So I'm playing at normal, what they call expeditioner, I think. I'm not even sure what the high difficulty setting is. You can put it in story mode, and that makes it easier. What I'll say is I'm not a high skill player. I'm not a person who likes dealing with a lot of do-overs. There's some encounters here which teeter on the edge of the Souls thing, where like you lose a battle and then sometimes the transit time back to that battle like is more than I prefer. That is often when I am going after there are these enemies called troubadours, and they're, like I said, they're I call them mini bosses, but like they're more powerful than bosses in some cases, but they are not required. So they are sometimes off in areas that are off the beaten path, and so there may not be like a campsite. There may not be a point of grace, so to speak, in their vicinity, and you may have to fast travel to get back to Salt Lake. So when you're trying to do that stuff, there's that mimes, right? There are these enemy class called mimes in the game where they're not always like it, but like your main boss, your campaign boss is like there's going to be an expedition flag right somewhere that's going to initiate a save point, and like it's very much at random. There's lots of save points. A lot of times a save point will trip just because you completed a battle that of like no like major significance, right? It'll just say save point, right? And so if you quit out of the game, you'll come back in that vicinity or whatever. But yeah, there's nothing that I can see that lets you like do any kind of slider to like make the timing part of it like less brutal. It's all just a matter of whether you play in story mode, expeditioner mode, or whatever the high difficulty is. What I will say is, again, I am not a high difficulty player. I do not believe in get good. I will say at my skill level, every battle has been surmountable. I may have had to fight it like a couple of times, but the timing nonsense, if you want to call it that, of every battle is eventually something that I can figure out. Even to the point where there are some battles that I believe that I would insist that like you're gonna have to parry, because like I said, you're gonna have to hit that guy and get like a 1,500, 2,000 point of damage, or else you're just gonna get so far behind that you never catch up. And despite that, like I said, every encounter that I've been exposed to, has been something achievable.
This is some high praise. So I'm really glad that you're enjoying it. And yeah, it makes me excited about jumping into it as somebody who enjoys RPGs. Like everything that you're talking about, like there's just such a well-rounded experience is how it sounds, right? Like gameplay, graphics, story, that you seem to be really enjoying this in a way that, I don't know that I don't know that we've gushed on since Avowed for 45 minutes about one game. So,
And I would say for me personally, like Avowed doesn't even come close.
okay,
I hate to.
that's good. Yes, thank you.
I
Okay.
mean, you know that I hate gushing because, like I said, I always feel like if you find a game that's perfect for you, like your compliments of it just wind up coming off as like hyperbole, right? But I genuinely have to say, for me personally, I mean, it's going to be different, right? For gamers, like my favorite games that I've played over the last few years, last decade or so is, Destiny 2 hit me a certain way. And actually was a sneak attack, right? Because that year is like, I was like, oh, holy crap. I look at my gameplay hours and I spent way more time in Destiny 2 than I thought I actually had. The Spider-Man games are games where I've loved the combat and I've loved the timing and the dodges, and the execution of like the big attacks and the animations that go off. I gotta say, like for me personally, outside of like the way I take the vehicle sims or whatever, but like from a story perspective and a mainstream genre perspective, I have to say this has been the most significant game that's hit me in like many years of the modern gaming era. I haven't found a thing that's hit me that way, just in terms of like story, narrative, voice acting, plot, immersion, world building, combat, progression systems, all those things. This is, lots of people talk about Starfield being like the game of the generation, or or whatever. But like to me, there's, at least so far today, there's not a game that's hit me like this game has. And I am a person who rails and pushes back on the whole notion of like, oh, February, my game of the year is this. And then, oh, March, I play a new game. And now my game of the year is this, right? It feels like kind of foolishness to me. But I do say this game is hitting me in terms of how I'm taking to it in a way that no game has in, like I said, I mean, since we've been podcasting, and that means going all the way back to casual adult gamers, like back in like the early 2000s, right?
That is significant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, and you're right. Like for every gamer, the experience is a little different, and what you're looking for is a little different. But also, if you've been listening to us talk over the last 6, 8, 10 years, that you get a sense of the types of games and games experiences that we enjoy, the things where we've been critical, the things that we have been left longing for. And to hear Game Logic sit and talk about Clair Obscura is really encouraging. Like I appreciate the perspective and the analysis that you bring, Game, and the value of understanding the depth of what a game does or what it doesn't do. And to hear you be so positive, it's a really good sign. I mean, this is exciting. Hopefully that's a good sign that other people are having similar experiences as well.
Yeah, and I mean the game's by no means perfect. The game definitely has some imperfections. There's definitely segments of the game where I feel like the pacing isn't as good as say South of Midnight. There's definitely some stretches in the game where you feel like you're being exposed more to narrative and exposition, and a little bit of story, and not as much combat. And so like you get to a point where like you're running around like desperately like seeking combat. You get stretches where you're given some breadcrumbs about the mystery and of the story, and then you get dry spells, right, where you're like we it's kind of like the old 22 episode television seasons, right, where you're like, man, we sure haven't like revisited like that old enemy that they fought like back in episode 3 for a very long time, but we know they're still around, like, and we know they're part of the story for the season, so like what the heck. So there's pieces like that. There's definitely kind of plot jumps where you're like, how did that happen? Like where was this person when this was going on? So I mean there's like I said, there's imperfections, and it's definitely not going to hit everybody. I mean, as good as the game is doing, we're going to talk about some sales stuff tonight. It hasn't hit sales numbers that like some other games have this season, this year. There might be some reasons for that, but yeah, but critical review wise, kind of like the Rotten Tomatoes esque of like video games, it seems to be doing well.
Cool. Well, this is great. Thank you for, we've spent this much time, but it's only been, it's well worth it to highlight a game that this is not a game that, I mean, it was a game that was coming with some hype because it's, day one launch on Game Pass. It's got, like you said, a good cast of voice actors, but it's also a first-time game studio. So this is not the new Rockstar game. This is not the new Ubisoft game, as we talked about last month with Shadows. Honestly, I uninstalled Shadows to be able to get this on my system. In part just because I was bouncing off Shadows, but I'm really looking forward to this. So I'll definitely have some time the next week or two to dive into this. So thanks, game. Just a quick one here, since I've been out and about. I haven't had a whole lot of time to play, but I've been playing on my Steam Deck and got a little chance to play it on desktop as well. So this is a game that I've been playing that I wanted to highlight. It came out this past week. It's on sale right now for like $14 on Steam. I think that the list price is $18. This is a Strange Scaffolding game. So Strange Scaffolding, the El Paso Elsewhere, or the I Am Your Beast developers, that they keep churning out games like crazy. This one is really, it had me at the name. It is Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3. So there is no Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 1 or Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 2. It starts off as a game that is kind of looks like it would be a visual novel, but kind of set in a Resident Evil type of, like if Resident Evil and Dino Crisis mushed up together in terms of its universe. But when you get into combat, or it's text dialogue, and the gameplay is actually, it's match 3. It's Puzzle Quest. If you remember Puzzle Quest from back in the late 2000s on the DS and PSP, or the re-release a few years back, it is the Bejeweled match 3, where you need to get a certain number of different types of gems in order to pull off an attack or a move, or cast a certain piece of magic in Puzzle Quest. Or you also have just regular swords that would do physical damage to your enemy. And so this is that same type of interaction, which I would be down for just in and of itself, because I enjoy a good match 3. And this is graphically is pretty rough in terms of its graphical assets seem to be done pretty quickly, whether it's the characters, which are just illustrations, or even the icons within the match 3 stuff. But it's that roughness, you start to understand like there's an intent behind it, because it's a run based to some degree. And as you get through what you think is your first run, and you defeat a big enemy, but you kind of restart back in the beginning. And this is where the game kind of opens up and tells you what it really is. It tells you what you just experienced was the demo of this game that was put together for a trade show. And this game is still in development. And so there's this meta narrative aspect going on with it, where there's, the main protagonist in the main antagonist in the game is telling the protagonist, like, this is a game that's still in development, but we're stuck in it because it's full of glitches and bugs, and you need to make your way through it to fix the bugs. So you're running back through and exploring the 4 levels of this mansion, kind of Resident Evil style mansion, through a kind of, a board, like in a roguelike, as you're moving from node to node on a map. And you as you encounter things, they may be different than the last time you encountered them, because now there's a bug there, and so you've got different wind conditions, or you've got to explore, even to get to a dead end. You'll start back over in that run, but getting to that dead end means that you fix the bug in that corner of the game, so that it, as it wraps around and tells you in the story, right? Like you've if somebody explores down there, in the game, now it's not going to crash on them, or like, so there is this kind of ongoing meta narrative piece, which is, it's humorous. The writing is done well. Strange Scaffolding's writing has, first game that I know them from is what is it, an airport run by dogs is the first game. So there's some comedy in their DNA, along with some good action with I'm Your Beast and El Paso Elsewhere. But this is very much more in the comedy writing aspect, and it's really enjoyable. It plays well on the Steam Deck. It plays just fine on PC as well, whether you're kind of switching around your icons for your match 3. But so, not a whole lot to say here, but it was a game that kind of piqued my interest in terms of the concept of it, and it worked really well for me in terms of a game to kind of unwind to at the end of a busy couple nights. And but it's also, because of its narrative, it's a game that I want to come back to and keep making my way through. But I don't feel like I need to be playing it for hours on end, where I can kind of chip away at it, do a run, come back to it. So it's a very easy to consume type of game. So that's Creepy Redneck Dinosaur Mansion 3.
Is this also a Devolver Digital published game?
No, it is Strange Scaffolding themselves. So
okay, gotcha.
Yep, just like they did I Am Your Beast and El Paso Elsewhere, it's just coming out through them. So, all right. Well, let's take some hits through the news of the week and see what comes. See what kind of discussions come our way. So the first news item I have here is a wrap up of the U.S. March monthly sales coming from GameIndustry.biz. This is from Samuel Roberts, which again, whether you're, there's information here from Circana and Matt Pescatella, but the regular rundown of the top 10 games from March, we have things, Assassin's Creed Shadows as number 1, as we were talking about. So this is US releases. MLB The Show 25 is number 2. Monster Hunter Wilds stays in the top 5. So it was in February, it was number 1. Now it's at number 3. WWE 2025 and Split Fiction round out the top 5 at 4 and number 5. I think that's a good sign for Split Fiction, that it's kind of coming in there alongside of some bigger titles and more established franchises. And then we get Call of Duty, we get PGA, NBA. The next new game is at number 9 with Bleach, Rebirth of Souls. And a game that I would anticipate is going to move back into the top 10, number 11, is Minecraft. And with all the success of the Minecraft movie, would not surprise me if, it would not surprise me if it would jump back up in its sales. But also, I probably would have said, who's left to buy it? But I would say the same thing about Grand Theft Auto 5, and that still is hanging in there at number 12 for the month of March. Anything in here, Game Logic, that stood out to you that you want to call out?
Super interesting to see that Suikoden 1 and 2 HD Remaster came in at number 18th.
It sure did, didn't it? Yep.
Number 18, rather, yeah.
Yeah, number 18. Yep, and Xenoblade Chronicles X came in at number 17. So, again,
are we seeing? Are we seeing a renaissance, if you will, but just a like financially impactful rise in the demand for turn-based RPGs?
I could see that you could make that argument, right? I think that the prominence of them, the kind of visibility and awareness of them, whether it's things like Suikoden or so would you call Clair Obscur a turn-based even with all the timing?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, I think there is, certainly there is that. I mean, Xenoblade Chronicles X is not so much that. But I think, be interesting to see, we heard this past couple weeks like the Lunar 1 and 2 remasters from the Sega Saturn and Sega CD and PlayStation sold out, and they're doing reprints already, which are kind of classic turn-based combat. So it does seem like there's a market for turn-based games more than what the last few iterations of a Final Fantasy would have you believe.
Also, super interesting to see a pick of both yours and mine, PGA Tour 2K25 coming in at number 7. Also vastly surprising, but I guess like in the month that the PGA Tour Masters happens, I mean, maybe explainable to some degree.
Well, and I think that to see it kind of hang in the top 10, where in February it launched at number 4 and in number 7 for March. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, good sign, a game that I've definitely been enjoying as well. So let's move to some more news in terms of game sales. We've got an article over at Video Games Chronicle in terms of Clair Obscur, which we've been talking about for the last hour or so, that it has sold more than 500,000 copies in the first 24 hours. So again, not huge milestones for big name publishers, but this is the first game from Sandfall Interactive, and they're feeling like this is bigger than they expected and bigger than they could have hoped for. I think
so. I almost hate to bring it up. There are some people who feel like it is unnecessarily discussing a thing that should be celebrated as a negative, but I do want to just ask the question. Do you feel the drop of the Oblivion Remaster in any way negatively impacted the sales of Clair Obscur?
I think it took some wind out of its sails, honestly. I think like this was a big game that I was looking forward to as an RPG player. It had a lot of hype around it. Um, you know, uh, and then to on the same week that it's coming out to have Oblivion kind of be, I wouldn't even call it shadow dropped because it had been leaked. And I think I also wonder if Oblivion's release was planned to be this time or that they bumped that up based on some of the leaks that were happening, and it was already loaded on servers and ready to go, and if they sit on it longer, you kind of lose some of that momentum from the leak itself, for good or for bad. But it does feel, I would say it does feel like it's taken some wind out of its sails for Clair Obscur. How about you? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like,
I don't know. I don't know if the sales impact was statistically significant. It's tough. It's tough to know that, right? Without some more transparency on data. How that plays out on the Xbox platform, where you may have a greater inclination for people to play Oblivion Remastered. Given Bethesda's, even before the acquisition, kind of historic association, right, with the Xbox brand name, versus going after a turn-based RPG that has been admittedly JRPG-ish. That impact may have been more significant on the Xbox platform. It's tough for me to know, where else, right? It's as much as the game's getting praised, it is an unknown studio, even though they have a pedigree and DNA that's very recognizable. But the only people who would know that would be people like us and people who listen to podcasts like this. So I don't know that it's that big. I think it's much more so the fact that again, it was shown in a showcase, but again, like your mainstream, the other 80, the other 96% of gamers don't pay attention to that stuff. And I haven't been in a GameStop to know. Maybe you have. Are there marketing posters for this game in there? Is it on like the GameSpot like sizzle reel that plays?
No, I don't. I have no idea. I've not been there lately enough to know. I mean, I actually think, like, in some ways, Clair Obscur lands better on a PlayStation 5 than Oblivion. At this point, the PlayStation 5 owners, I would be shocked to see, to believe that there is this huge amount of people who have been waiting 20 years to play the game that PlayStation 3 didn't get. Right, like, that this is a well-produced, kind of high production value turn-based RPG that fits very much within a lot of where PlayStation 5 hits its bread and butter in terms of other RPGs and sales numbers. And I think, we'll talk about this briefly coming up as well in terms of sales numbers with Indiana Jones, that just by the sheer install base of the PlayStation 5, Indiana Jones is tracking to sell better on PlayStation 5 than it has on PC and Xbox, even after being out for almost 6 months at this point, 5 months at this point. So hopefully that means Clair Obscur finds its audience. Clair Obscur and Oblivion both being on Game Pass for Xbox in some way kind of washes out the sales numbers on the Xbox platform. So, and I would be interested in a few months to see what the Steam sales numbers look like for the Oblivion remaster, where, how big is the mod scene that is going to hang on to what they already have and what they've been working on versus what they're going to buy in the Oblivion remaster.
Oh, I did see a report that says the vast majority of Oblivion mods still work on the remaster.
Interesting. That's an interesting piece too. So, well, let's hit that Oblivion news story here in terms of Oblivion Remaster breaking 4 million players in 4 days. So again, this is not sales numbers because we're living with Game Pass access as well. But this article coming off of WCCF Tech from Alesso Blue, dealing with Oblivion hitting 4 million players, 4 million. It's not even necessarily registrations, right? But these are 4 million players in its first 4 days over the course of PC and Xbox and PlayStation 5 as well. Game Logic, you grabbed the story. Is there anything here besides just the sheer uptake in numbers that stood out to you?
Yeah, no, that's all I put in the rundown for. I know. I'm trying to find it now. It's being difficult. I know. I mean, we were watching it in the holy cow. It's number one. It's number one. It's number one on the Steam charts right now. In terms of top sellers, and Clair Obscur number 30. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is number 2. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Good sign for both those games. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
and I would think that the Clair Obscur studio is feeling pretty good about being number 2 up against a Bethesda product. So, as an individual, as a first release, smaller studio, that's bringing a lot of light to what their next project could potentially be.
I hope they're feeling pretty good. So we had the instance last year where we had more than one indie title who had targeted release date, and were completely blown out of the water by EA out of the blue, nowhere, with no warning, dropping the Command and Conquer.
That's right. I remember that
collection, remaster collection, as a bundle right, on sale on Steam. Like, just completely obliterated some games. Now, these were games that, like, it was like one developer working out of their garage, right? They were very small scale games. It would be nice to know the inside baseball. Like, I would hope that there had been discussion and notification to that team by their account manager at Xbox, or right, their Game Pass deal point of contact, that, hey, just so you guys know, this is going down. If they found out about it as a surprise, that I would just wonder what that inside baseball was. Like, I could definitely see a perspective where, if I'm sitting in another studio, maybe I'm being nice publicly facing because it's Microsoft and it's Xbox, and I'm, trying to, stay in good graces. But I can also see where, behind closed doors, like, I'm really not particularly happy with the way this went down,
It does make you wonder, right? Because this was one of their big games on last summer's showcase, and then came back in their spring, their early, like, March showcase as well. Like, it was on their list of games that were popping this spring. You had I can't even remember the game from January that anyhow, we'll move
Ninja
on.
Gaiden.
No, well, yeah, Ninja Gaiden kind of shadow dropped, but then there was another kind of RPG with the kind of Breath of the Wild type physics and everything from the studio, the developer from Dragon Age. I'll look it up here in a little bit. But we had that, we had Avowed, then we had Midnight, and then April was Clair Obscura, and May is Doom. And that's how they were, it was well publicized as being a big title for them, until Monday and Tuesday happened, and suddenly it's the second big RPG that's releasing in the same week. So we'll see where those numbers play out here, but let's keep moving on for the sake of time. Let's hit a few other news stories here. I pulled this one just because anytime that I see a publisher and media kind of push back against OpenAI and ChatGPT in terms of scraping content, I think it's always worthwhile to highlight. So this is Ziff Davis is suing OpenAI in terms of copyright infringement. This is coming from Video Games Chronicle, coming up on the 25th of April, from Chris Scullion. Ziff Davis, which is at this point has been all kinds of things over time, all the way back to EGM and GameSpot. But right now we're looking at IGN, Eurogamer, GamesIndustry.biz, Digital Foundry, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG247, the suite of console specific sites like Nintendo Life, Push Square, Pure Xbox are all part of the Ziff Davis banner. But the the filing here, which is saying, and I quote, intentionally, relentlessly reproduced exact copies and creative derivatives of Ziff Davis work, and by doing so is infringed on its copyright and trademark. So this is one of again, the challenge moving forward as a video game industry, as a video game journalism and media industry, of so much revenue is based around ad revenue. And if AI can scrape it and throw it up to you so that you never actually have to click on anything, what happens to the producers of that content? And yes, I do care about the producers of that content, because over the years, many of us have followed them on podcasts and videos and everything else. But also, if there's no longer people there to write that information, where is that information being produced that AI in the future is going to scrape from? Like, how do we get that information out there in a way that isn't simply just a press release from a studio or a publisher? So again, I want to highlight this, whether or not it ends up going anywhere, but I think it is going to be a continuing issue within the industry, along with all kinds of other news media industries, as they try to figure out how to wrestle with. We saw last year we had some content, being licensed out to OpenAI rather than, getting paid for it rather than fighting it, which at least then you know where it's coming from versus having it kind of scraped off without any type of recognition. So, Game Logic, we've got 2 more stories here. You want to hit those quick before we start to head into the final turn?
Actually, the only one I'm going to mention is just the report on the Nintendo Switch 2 SOC. A leaker on Steam apparently released a photo which shows I forget what those photos are called, but it's basically allows you to see like the tape out and the componentry of what's on the die for the SOC. It looks to be the NVIDIA Tegra T239, which I think is largely what was rumored before. I haven't seen anything that jumps out at me as like, super particularly interesting about that chip as far as like that being confirmed or revealed. It's just a chip that has the exact specs that we've been told about for the Nintendo Switch. So I don't think that it's anything significant. It's just corroboration of something that people have largely been aware of.
Nice. Thank you. All right, let's round the corner and hit rest of our round robin and game cleanup before we head out for the night. I myself, as I said, have been out and traveling, but early in the week I did spent a night playing the original Oblivion right before the remaster was announced, just to be able to draw some comparisons. And by the end of that, getting through the tutorial section, I was glad to know that there was a remaster coming. I was playing the original on Xbox Series X on a 4K TV, and yeah, it didn't look so bad, but also it reminded me, and this is actually it's true about the remaster as well. I've played just through the tutorial and the remaster because that's I just wanted a point of comparison. Definitely looks better. The level up is a little more fluid. You still do some of the same things in terms of the more you use a skill, it builds toward leveling up, but then leveling up is not locked down as much in terms of you get points that you can distribute rather than simply just going toward whatever you used. So it does seem a little more flexible there, but coming away from both of these experiences, and definitely I want to play more of the remaster in the coming week, but it made me realize how smooth the onboarding process and the UI and user experience is with Avowed. That it, as we talked about, it clears away, it knows that it's a video game, doesn't try to be anything else, and it makes the gameplay process so much smoother by not trying to force you to pretend like you're in a simulation. So, but visually, remaster looks great. I don't have any real fondness. I did not play the original Oblivion back in the day, so I'm coming at this without any nostalgia glasses. But I definitely am appreciating just the brief visuals that I've seen. So I know for next week I'll be playing some Clair Obscur and Oblivion Remaster when I get back on the podcast next. Game Logic, you've got 2 more games here to round us out.
Yeah, nothing big to report on these. I think I've talked about playing these before. So I've also been kind of in the background. This was before Clair Obscur came out. I've been doing a run in Borderlands 3. Just kind of going back and re-experiencing that. I've mentioned how cell shading is a good technical implementation thing to choose because it just ages fine. Doesn't really show signs of aging, right? Cell shading looks pretty much the same from 1 year to in the neck. And then been playing Black Ops 6, in the background, kind of for multiplayer. Again, haven't touched it since Clair Obscur came out, but I'm sure I'll need to take a break and I'll go back and play some matches this week as well.
Sounds good. All right, this coming into the end of our episode here. Nate, glad you could make it in, or at least thanks for popping into the chat. Hope you've enjoyed the rest of the show or get a chance to come back and listen. Lorana, I'm glad you've been here. Anybody else who's been around listening to us live, thank you very much. If you are checking us out later on, whether it's on YouTube or on your podcatcher of choice, always glad to have you. We come at you here every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern time. This coming week, we've got a couple releases here, mainly some things related to motorsports and racing around with. We get the Motor GP 25 coming out on the 30th. Game Logic, this is the motorcycle one you were playing last year's version, is that correct?
Yeah, so I played last year. I don't know if I owned that game or if I was playing it in Game Pass, but at least on the European World Circuit and stage, you have two primary motorbike circuits. You have MotoGP and World Superbike. MotoGP is the more popular one. It's kind of the one that runs kind of neck and neck in people's mind share with like Formula One for auto racing. So that game, good to see its kind of resurgence of it coming back to be something that is of interest at scale on the gaming market. And so the other version is coming out. These games typically, Formula One comes out at the end of May, so it seems like these games like get started and then come out like 3 months or so, 4 months maybe after the season has started. So just so that they can get in any last minute modeling of tracks and driver announcements or changes or whatever that got made, throughout the early part of the season. So yeah.
Nice. And then we also get previously Xbox and PC exclusive Forza Horizon 5 is coming to PlayStation 5 on April 29th. So it'd be interesting to see what the reception of that looks like and how the performance plays as well. So anything else coming up on your radar, Game Logic, before we head off into the sunset or into the night sky?
I mean, we'll talk about it next week, but right around the corner from this will be the Days Gone remastered. I have seen, so I think last week or maybe it came out.
It was last week.
It came out last week. Yeah. I have seen confirmation that so the announcement of it in the release marketing for it was weird. It is out on PS5. I've heard that it's also available on PS4. I haven't seen corroboration of that. Last week when we talked about it, I'd seen that it was coming to PC as well, but then hadn't seen like a second site mention that. It is on PC. It is a $10 upgrade if you're trying to get the DLC, which I guess is the Horde mode or whatever. But the tech improvements that are part of the remaster, that is just coming to PC for free, at least on Steam. So on Steam, if you own Days Gone Remastered, you're getting a patch that does all the visual and graphical enhancements and updates. It's just if you want the DLC, then you go and you buy the DLC for $10 or whatever.
Wow. So PC has Days Gone, which came out on PC in 2021. You get the remaster features for free unless you're getting Horde mode.
That
on PlayStation 5, the remaster is PlayStation 5 only. It's not on PlayStation 4. That if you own the game, or if you have purchased the game, how about that? Not owning it within your library. If you've purchased the game, it is just a $10 upgrade. If you own the game in your library and got it through PlayStation Plus, or it was in the PlayStation 4 Essentials when PlayStation 5 launched.
Or the PlayStation 5. Was it in the PlayStation 5? What was that thing called?
Yeah, whatever the like the PS4 catalog or the like
Yeah,
when you had a bunch of PlayStation 4 games.
I call it the PS5. We've got a crappy launch lineup, so we're gonna
Yeah,
give you
right.
30
Like
free games.
we don't have a lot, so here's some more games that will play nicely on your new system. If you purchased it or if you know, kind of claimed it that way, it does not count as a purchase. So you need to buy the full game itself. So I I own the physical disc of it at one point and traded it off, sold it off because I had claimed it on the PS5 or PS4 essential pieces. And I bet if I still would have had that physical disc, I would have been able to claim the $10 upgrade. So it'd be interesting to see what the pricing on this ends up being and how long they keep it at this full price piece as well. So plenty to talk about tonight. Game Logic, always glad to talk about it with you. We've got more to talk about next week. Ta will be back next week. I will be out for some family business. So I appreciate you having me here tonight and looking forward to get back to you in 2 weeks from now. But next week, Ta will be here. Game Logic will be here as well. We'll be coming to you live on a Sunday evening for episode 385 at the beginning of April there. So for myself, DBQ Hams, and Game Logic, this has been enough to keep going. So until next week, play the games you love those you play with, and be kind to yourself. Good night, everybody.